I asked one thing that morning. Just one. Can I use Mia's car to get to my interview? I asked, standing in the kitchen with my coffee half drunk and my nerves fully awake. My dad didn't look up from his phone. That's her car. You should have asked her, he said. I did, I said. She said no, my mom asked, glancing up from rinsing a pan in the sink. She said no, I confirmed. Well, then that's your answer, my mom replied. We don't interfere with her things. I blinked, feeling heat rise behind my eyes. Right, because boundaries only go one way in this house, I said. What's that supposed to mean? My dad asked, finally looking up. It means I've been helping pay for the groceries, the electric bill, even the garbage bags, I said, setting my mug down. But when I asked to use something for 20 minutes, suddenly I'm out of line. That's different, my mom said, drying her hands. She bought that car. With what money? I asked. She doesn't work. She's been between jobs for 2 years. She saved, my dad said flatly. No, she didn't, I said. She got help. From you. No one said anything. The silence hung between us like an admission neither of them wanted to say out loud. My dad finally sighed and met my eyes. This isn't about the car, is it? No, I said. It's not. I turned and walked back to my room. No slamming doors. No shouting. Just silence that buzzed in my ears and said everything they wouldn't. When I was a kid, they said we were a team. When I was a teen, they said, we all pitch in. Now, at 28, they say nothing at all. They just keep taking. Because I'm easy. Because I don't throw fits or make scenes. Because I follow the rules, whatever they are that day. We share everything, my dad told me last year when I moved back in after the layoff. That's how families get by. But that principle never applied to Mia. She doesn't chip in. She doesn't clean. She doesn't cook. She doesn't pay utilities. She doesn't even take out the trash unless someone nags her. And yet, when she orders food, no one bats an eye. When she disappears for weekends with her friends, no one asks where she's been. But when I came home late from a second interview last week, my mom muttered from the couch, could have used a heads up. We thought something happened, my dad added. Something did happen. I started seeing everything for what it really was. The car was just the spark that lit a fire I'd been carrying for years. I wasn't mad about not driving it. I had other ways to get there, a bus, a ride share, a friend. I wasn't helpless. I was just done pretending this house was neutral ground. Because it wasn't. It never had been. Later that evening, I brought it up again at dinner. You know the rules, my mom said, not looking at me. I know my rules, I said sharply. Excuse me, my mom asked, finally setting her fork down. You say we all share in this house, I said. But I've never seen Mia share anything. She's been going through a lot, my dad said quickly. So have I replied, louder than I meant to. The table fell quiet. I've been through layoffs. I've worked 2 jobs. I pay rent. I cover groceries, I continued. She's been on vacation for years. That's enough, my dad said, raising his voice for the first time. No, I said. It's not. Mia walked into the kitchen at that moment, half asleep in a sweatshirt 3 sizes too big and her hair in a bun. What's going on? Mia asked, looking around. I asked to borrow your car, I told her. You said no. That's fine. But then Mom and Dad act like I committed a crime by bringing it up. It's my car, Mia said with a shrug. I don't like people messing with my stuff. And yet, I said, every time I leave leftovers in the fridge, someone eats them without asking. You're the one who moved back in, Mia said coldly. She wasn't wrong. But she wasn't right either. When I moved back in, I did everything right. I asked before taking space. I offered to pay. I respected the rules. I shared. Everything. Mia never had to ask. She never offered. And rules bent around her like she was made of light. The next morning, I took the bus to my interview. It was hot. The route was long. I had to change lines twice. But I made it on time. And I did great. Because I wasn't just trying to get a job anymore. I was trying to get out. When I got back home, Mia was in the driveway waxing her car. Music was playing. She held a cold drink in one hand and a smug look in the other. You look sweaty, Mia said as I walked past. Yeah, I said, smiling. That's what effort looks like. She raised an eyebrow, then turned back to her playlist without another word. Inside, my mom stood at the stove. How'd it go? My mom asked. Good, I said. They want a second meeting. Make sure you let us know next time if you'll be late, my mom said, not even turning to look at me. It was 4:30 p.m. Apparently, that was late now. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. This wasn't about cars or food or even money. It was about who got to be free and who didn't. Mia lived like a guest. I lived like a tenant. But neither of us lived like a daughter. Not really. She was allowed softness, laziness, entitlement. I was expected to be grateful, responsible, and quiet. Every family has its golden child. Every family has its anchor. I was tired of sinking while she floated. And for the first time, I realized I didn't have to stay anchored. This house taught me how to survive unfairness. But it also taught me what I would never allow in my own home. I turned off the light. And as the room faded to black, I whispered to myself it wasn't about fairness. It was about control, and I was the only one under it. The day I moved back in after college, I showed up with boxes, job applications, and a promise to help however I could. My dad met me at the door and said, "Just because you're back doesn't mean you get a free ride." "I know," I said, already reaching into my wallet to hand over the rent we'd agreed on. My mom barely looked at me when I walked past the kitchen. "Put your things in the guest room for now," she said. "We still haven't moved your sister's stuff out of your old room." I nodded. That's fine. It wasn't. Mia had moved out years before me, only to come back after she dropped out of school. She had barely lasted a semester, but no one ever brought it up. The house still had her name stitched into pillows, her framed photos on the walls, her childhood trophies lining the bookshelf I once dusted. Meanwhile, I was back after 4 years with a degree, no job, and an inbox full of rejection letters. But there was no celebration. No, we're proud of you. Only, when are you going to start paying rent? 3 weeks in, I was juggling 2 part-time jobs and still being asked to help with the dishes, the laundry, the groceries. "Can you pick up some extra chicken on your way home?" my mom texted one night. "Sure," I replied. That night at dinner, Mia walked in carrying a takeout bag from her favorite Thai place and sat down at the table without saying a word. My dad gestured at the takeout. "You didn't ask if anyone wanted anything?" Mia just laughed. I figured I deserved a treat. "I've had a long week." I asked, "Doing what?" Mia blinked. "Life." I looked to my mom for some sort of response. My mom said, "Let her be. She's adjusting." "To what?" I asked. "She hasn't worked a day since she got back." "She'll find something," my dad said. "It's just harder for her." I set my fork down. Why is it always harder for her? She doesn't pay rent. She doesn't clean. She doesn't even offer. "She's looking," my mom said, her voice sharp. "You think we don't notice your attitude?" I stood up and started clearing the plates I bought, washed, and now cleaned again. "Thanks for dinner," Mia said with a wink as she walked out. I didn't respond. A few months later, I got promoted at work. It wasn't much, an assistant manager position at the bookstore, but it meant stability, better hours, and a small raise. I came home feeling proud. When I told my parents over dinner, my dad said, "Good. Now maybe you can start helping more around here." I stared at him. I already help. I do more than help. I've been keeping this kitchen stocked for months. "Don't be dramatic," my mom said. "We all pitch in." I looked at Mia, scrolling on her phone with earbuds in. "Really?" I asked. My dad snapped, "That's enough." I walked away before I said something I'd regret. The next morning, Mia's car was blocking mine in the driveway. I tapped on her window. "Mia," I said, "I've got work. Can you move?" Mia rolled her eyes, but started the car. "Would have been nice to get a heads up," she muttered as she pulled out. "It's my work schedule." "It doesn't change," I said. "Whatever," Mia replied. Later that day, I came home to find my food missing from the fridge. The salad I'd packed for the next day, the yogurt I'd bought, the chicken breasts I was marinating, all gone. "Mia," I shouted. She came out of the living room like she had no idea what I was talking about. "You ate my food," I said. "I was hungry," Mia said, shrugging. "I'll replace it." "You never do," I said. It's food. Relax. My mom came out of the laundry room. What's going on? She ate all my groceries again, I said. She said she'd replace it, my mom replied. She won't, I said. My dad chimed in from the hallway. It's not worth fighting about. We're a family. We share things here. I laughed. Funny. That rule only applies when it's my stuff. No one responded. That weekend, Mia's friends came over and stayed until 2 a.m. They played loud music, spilled beer on the rug, and left pizza boxes everywhere. When I asked her to clean up, Mia said, "Chill out. You're not the mom." "No," I said. "I'm the one who's going to clean this mess if you don't." She waved me off. "I'll get to it tomorrow." She didn't. I did. Every time I tried to set a boundary, I was told I was too rigid, too serious, too dramatic. But Mia? She was going through things. She was fragile. She was sensitive. When I finally saved enough to look for my own place, I brought it up one night after dinner. "I think I found an apartment near the bookstore," I said. My mom frowned. "Why would you move out? You're finally getting ahead." My dad added, "We'll miss having you here." I stared at them. "You asked me for rent on day one, but you won't even ask Mia to take out the trash." "She needs more time," my mom said. "She's had years," I said. Mia strolled in just then and flopped on the couch. "You guys arguing again?" she asked, looking amused. "No," I said. "Just finalizing my exit." She looked at me. "You'll be back." I smiled. Don't bet on it. Packing up was easier than I expected. I didn't have much, just clothes, books, my laptop, and the lessons burned into my memory. Lessons like, if you work hard and stay quiet, they will expect more of the same. Lessons like, favoritism doesn't always look like praise, it looks like excuses. And this one, I lived like a tenant. She lived like a guest of honor. And the only person enforcing that system was me by staying silent. As I loaded the last box into my car, my dad came out with a plastic grocery bag in his hand. "You forgot this," he said. I looked inside. It was a half-eaten bag of chips and a roll of duct tape. "I think that's Mia's," I said. He smiled awkwardly. "Guess we're all mixed up sometimes." "Not really," I said. Some things were always pretty clear. I got in my car and drove off without looking back. I started doing the math. Not just the bills or the rent. I'd been covering that since day one. No, I started tracking everything. The gallons of milk, the electric bill, the dozens of toilet paper rolls I bought, the grocery runs I made, the times I vacuumed, cleaned the bathroom, fixed the Wi-Fi, and no one noticed. And then I tracked what I didn't get, what was not for me. I asked once if we could switch up dinner, just once, because I had developed an allergy. My mom shook her head and said, "We all like it this way." I said, "But it literally makes me sick." My dad replied, "Just pick around it." Mia, of course, had gotten a whole pantry shelf cleared for her gluten-free snacks. Organic, imported, and triple the cost. Nobody else touched those. I started keeping a notebook. Every time I bought something, every time I paid for something, every time I offered something. Like the time the power bill was due and no one else even blinked. My mom said, "The bill's high this month. You might want to pay it early, just in case." I asked, "What about Mia?" My mom frowned. "She's between things." "She's always between things," I replied. "She's trying her best," my dad added. I said, "So am I. But you never give me that excuse." That night, I bought a cheap safe and started locking away things I paid for coffee, charging cables, even my own shampoo. Mia saw me once and laughed. "Getting paranoid?" I replied, "No, just smart." I started spending more time at the library. Not just because it was quiet, but because it was free air conditioning and free Wi-Fi. I researched apartments, checked job boards, started brushing up on skills I had let go stale. One night, when I came home, Mia was sprawled on the couch watching TV. One of my shows. On the streaming service I paid for. She didn't look up. I said, "Hey, can I have the remote?" She sighed dramatically. "I'm in the middle of something." I said, "It's my account." She shrugged. "We share things in this house, remember?" I smiled coldly and said, "Good to know." That night, I changed all my passwords. The next morning, Mia stormed into the kitchen. "Why can't I log in?" I said, Must be a glitch. My dad looked up from his newspaper and said, Mia's been complaining all morning. I replied, I'm not tech support. I started packing my lunches and labeling them. I put a padlock on one side of the fridge and bought a small dorm-style fridge for my room. I scheduled interviews, some virtual, some in person. I even landed a freelance contract that paid better than both my part-time jobs combined. I didn't tell anyone, because the one thing I learned growing up in that house was this: the moment they know you're moving forward, they try to guilt you into staying behind. One day, my mom cornered me in the hallway. She said, "You've been acting different." I replied, just focused. She narrowed her eyes. "On what?" I said. Finally, she said, "That's selfish." I asked why. "Because I'm not bleeding myself dry anymore?" She didn't answer. Later that week, Mia's car broke down. Again. She asked me, "Can I borrow your car?" I said, "No," she blinked. "Why not?" I said, "That's my car. You don't get to touch it." She said, "Wow, so petty." I replied, "You told me the same thing when I needed help getting to a job interview. Remember that?" She looked away and said, "That was different." "No," I said. "It wasn't." I found a place that weekend, a small one-bedroom in a neighborhood 30 minutes away. Nothing fancy, but clean, safe, and mine. I put down the deposit with money I saved by saying no. No to extra groceries. No to gas money. No to rides. No to Mia's random takeout cravings. No to, "Can you cover it this month?" I got boxes and started packing slowly. My dad saw and said, "Where are you going?" I replied, "Out." He said, "You didn't even talk to us about this." I said, "You never asked." That night, over dinner, the silence was thick. Mia asked, "So you're just going to leave us like that?" I said, "Like what?" She said, "Like you're better than us." I smiled. Not better. Just done playing dumb. My mom dropped her fork. "That's uncalled for." I said, "No. What's uncalled for is me paying to live in a house where I get no respect. What's uncalled for is watching you all coddle Mia while expecting me to be grateful for crumbs." My dad said, "You're being dramatic." I said, "No. I'm just done subsidizing someone else's comfort." The next day, I moved out. No one helped. Mia stayed in her room. My parents hovered but didn't lift a finger. That was fine. I'd done it all myself anyway. When I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror and didn't feel sad. Just clear. They told me to be grateful. So I planned my escape in silence. And now I was free. It happened on a Thursday. I had stopped by the house, mostly out of obligation. My mom said she needed help unloading groceries, and even though I had my own fridge now, I figured, one last olive branch. A little gesture. Something to remind myself I was still a decent daughter, even if I no longer lived like one. I walked in carrying 2 bags and found them all standing in the driveway. Mia was squealing. She spun in a little circle, phone in hand, pointing to a silver compact SUV with a bright red bow on the hood. My mom clapped and said, "Surprise." Mia ran over and hugged her. "You're kidding me. You really did it." My dad grinned. "We figured it was time. You've been cooped up too long. You need freedom." I stood still on the edge of the driveway, a grocery bag digging into my hand. Mia chirped, "This is the one I wanted, too. You remembered." My mom said, "Of course I did, sweetheart. I wanted you to feel taken care of." I cleared my throat. No one looked over. I said, "Need help unloading these?" My mom turned, distracted. "Oh, just leave them on the counter." "Thank you." I walked past the car slowly, taking in the spotless rims, the plastic wrapping on the seats, the new registration sticker already affixed to the windshield. I asked, "Is it leased or?" My dad answered, "We bought it outright." I nodded. Nice. No one asked how my job was going. No one mentioned the 3 interviews I'd had that week. No one asked how I managed groceries on top of rent. No one said thank you for the detergent, paper towels, and coffee I dropped off just last weekend. But they bought me a car. A second one. Because the first had too many issues. I leaned against the kitchen counter later, waiting for anyone, to acknowledge it. Mia came in humming and grabbed a bottle of sparkling juice from the fridge. I said, "Congrats on the car." She said, "Thanks." Then she added, I mean, I needed it. I've been, trapped in this house. I replied, you've had a car. She waved her hand. It was basically falling apart. I couldn't even play music without the speakers crackling. I nodded slowly. That must have been hard. She didn't hear the tone. Or didn't care. My mom walked in then, smiling. I'm glad we could do this for her. She's been so patient. I asked, you paid in full? My mom nodded. Well, we helped with most of it. She'll pay us back slowly. I looked her dead in the eye and asked, like the way I paid rent? My mom's face tightened. That was different. I said, how? She looked flustered. You were already working. You had income. Mia's been finding her way. I asked, and I wasn't? She sighed. You're more stable. I laughed. You mean more useful. She didn't answer. I walked outside and sat on the curb. The air smelled like rubber and fake celebration. Inside, they were still talking about financing, plates, and insurance. I thought about the month I skipped meals to cover utilities for the house. I thought about the time I canceled plans to babysit a cousin because Mia had a date. I thought about the last time anyone said thank you to me. I couldn't remember when it was. My phone buzzed. A notification from my budgeting app. My grocery bill had gone up again. That same week, Mia posted a photo of the new car with the caption, "Proof you get what you deserve." The comments poured in. Yes, queen. So proud of you. Hard work pays off. Hard work? I stared at the photo and shook my head. She'd never worked a full-time job. She barely held part-time gigs longer than a month. When I offered to help her build a resume last year, she said, I'll figure it out. I don't need a lecture. I never mentioned it again. But here she was, keys in hand, camera flashing, posting about triumph she hadn't earned. It wasn't just favoritism anymore. It was humiliation. I showed up, gave everything I had, and was treated like a backup plan. Mia stayed home, got bailed out, and was treated like a queen. I used to think if I just did more, helped more, gave more, smiled more, they'd eventually see me. But now I realized they saw me just fine. They saw someone they could depend on. Someone who would never complain, never push back, never make them uncomfortable. Someone who would carry the weight so Mia didn't have to. I stood up and walked back inside. Mia was opening a gift bag from my mom. Oh my God, you even got me air fresheners? Mia beamed. My mom said, it's lavender. Your favorite. I put my keys on the counter. My mom glanced over. Heading out? I said, yeah. I've got groceries at home to put away. She said, oh, okay. Well, thanks for helping. I looked at her for a long second. Then I said, you're welcome. She looked confused, like she didn't know what I meant. But I wasn't talking about the groceries. I was talking about everything. The years of quiet compliance. The meals I cooked. The errands I ran. The peace I kept. The forgiveness I gave when they didn't even ask. You're welcome, I said again, softer this time. Then I turned and walked out the door. That night, I sat in my own apartment, small, cluttered, imperfect, and poured myself a glass of water. I toasted the ceiling and said aloud to me, I might not have a car with a bow on it, but I had something better, clarity. And soon, I'd have my own kind of freedom. I moved out on a Thursday. No tears. No shouting. Just quiet steps and a sigh of relief when I closed the door behind me. No one noticed at first. The week before, I'd picked up the keys to a small studio apartment on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just white walls, scuffed floors, and a balcony that overlooked a parking lot. But it had one thing I hadn't felt in years. Autonomy. I remember packing my things into cardboard boxes I bought from the grocery store. No one offered to help. Mia was in the living room watching something loud on her tablet. My mom walked past my room twice and didn't ask a thing. I loaded the last box into my trunk and stood in the driveway. The sun was going down. No goodbyes. Just silence. And that was the most telling part of all. By Sunday, I got my first text. It was from Dad. Dad wrote, "Did you take the space heater from the garage?" I replied, yes. It was mine. I bought it 2 winters ago. He left it on read. No, where are you? No, are you okay? Just concern about an appliance. My new apartment smelled like cleaning fluid and old wood. The tap made a gurgling noise every time I used it. But I lit a candle, made a cup of tea, and sat on the floor, feeling more peaceful than I had in months. I didn't have a couch yet, but I had my own space. No passive-aggressive comments. No unfair rules. Just quiet. A few days later, I got another text. This time from Mom. Mom wrote, "Do you want to come by for dinner Friday? We're making lasagna." I stared at the message. No acknowledgement of my absence. No mention of why I left. Just an invitation as if I'd simply gone on vacation. I replied, "Thanks, but I have plans." She wrote back, "Suit yourself." 3 words. That was it. I told my coworker Liza about it during our lunch break. I said, "It's like they don't even care why I left. They're just annoyed I'm not around to do stuff anymore." Liza nodded and said, "You took yourself out of their service rotation. That's the real problem." I laughed, but it stung. Because it was true. At home, I'd paid rent, covered utilities, took Mia to her appointments when no one else wanted to, did groceries, made dinner half the week. But none of it had ever counted for anything because they were so used to it. The first Friday night alone in my apartment, I ordered Thai food and watched a movie on my laptop. No one changed the channel on me. No one barged in asking for favors. I felt invisible and powerful all at once. On Monday, Mia texted me. Mia wrote, "You seriously moved out over the car?" I replied, "No." That was just the final straw. She didn't answer. Later that night, I got a call from my mom. I let it go to voicemail. Her message said, "I just want to make sure you're not making a mistake. You know rent isn't cheap. We were trying to look out for you. Look out for me." That made me laugh. I remembered the months I worked overtime to pay for groceries while Mia lounged around, unemployed and unbothered. I remembered Dad asking why I hadn't filled up the gas in the family car when Mia had been driving it for 2 weeks. I remembered standing at the kitchen counter with an eviction notice in my hand once because I'd missed rent when I was sick and no one noticed. Now they were looking out for me. I deleted the message. At work, things picked up. I started picking up extra shifts, saving aggressively, setting up a proper emergency fund. I ate instant noodles some nights, but they were mine. No one questioned how I spent my money or told me I needed to share. That first paycheck after moving out felt like gold. I whispered to myself, "This is the first time I've earned something and not had it taken from me." When my birthday came around, no one from the house said a word. But my friends from work threw a tiny surprise at the office. Cake, a balloon taped to my desk, a card they all signed. I cried in the bathroom. Not because of the card, but because of what it meant. People remembered. They made an effort. No one rolled their eyes or asked if Mia would be there instead. Later that week, Dad called. He said, "Hey, just wondering when you're stopping by. We haven't seen you in a bit." I asked, "What do you mean stopping by? I live somewhere else now." He replied, "Well, you know. Don't be a stranger." I said, "You were all strangers to me while I lived there." He paused. "That's not fair." I answered, "Neither was how I was treated." And I hung up. I didn't do it out of anger. I did it because I meant it. For years, they only noticed me when I wasn't doing enough. But now that I wasn't doing anything for them, they finally saw me. It was never about love. It was about labor. The less of it I gave, the more my absence glowed. The next time Mia texted me, it was about groceries. Mia wrote, "Are you still doing the family shopping this month?" I replied, "Nope. That was never my job." She wrote, "Whatever." I smiled. At night, I looked around my little apartment. It was nothing fancy. I still had a folding table as a desk. My chair creaked when I sat in it. But every item in that space was mine, bought with money I earned, chosen with intention. No one got to touch it unless I said so. I played music as loud as I wanted. I slept with my door open or closed. I lit incense and let it burn without someone walking in to say it smelled weird. For the first time, I didn't just exist. I lived. And every time someone from that old house tried to call me back, I reminded myself I left because I had to. But I stayed away because I finally could. It started with a voicemail from my mother. Mom said, "Hey, sweetie, we haven't heard from you in a while. Just wanted to say we miss you. Maybe come by for dinner. I stared at the screen and didn't press play again. I didn't need to. I'd heard those words before, but never when I actually lived in their house. Back then, they never said they missed me. They said things like, "Did you take out the trash?" Or, "Why is the electric bill so high this month?" Not, "We miss you." And certainly not, "How are you?" So I didn't call back. A few days later, my dad texted. Dad wrote, "Hope everything's going good. Things are a little tight here. Just wondering if you have a few bucks to spare. Just for now." I stared at the message for a long time. I even laughed out loud. I said to myself, now it's tight. When I lived there, paying rent, groceries, splitting the water bill while my sister did nothing, it wasn't tight. It was expected, routine, normal. But now, with only one daughter carrying the load, they finally noticed the weight. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I drove to my job that morning with music blasting from the old stereo in my used car. I rolled the window down and felt the wind on my face. The road belonged to me. That night, I opened my budgeting app and smiled. My savings had grown. My debt was shrinking. My small freelance side gig had become a steady stream of clients. Meanwhile, they were struggling. The next morning, I got another text. Mom wrote, "We're not trying to pressure you. Just, Mia isn't working yet, and your dad's paycheck's been late. Anything you can do would help." I replied, "I thought the house shared everything." Mom responded, "Don't be cruel." I texted back, "You said that to me. You said the house shares everything when I asked for basic fairness. So ask her." They didn't reply. I went to work that day with a strange calm in my chest. It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. They didn't miss me. They missed my wallet, my chores, my silence. Later that evening, I got a message from Mia. Mia wrote, "Thanks a lot for putting them in a bad position. You know they need help." I replied, "And you know I'm not your fallback plan." She answered, "You've changed." I replied, "No, I just got tired." I left it at that. That weekend, I got coffee with my friend Jasmine. We sat on the patio of our favorite cafe, the sun catching the edge of her sunglasses. Jasmine asked, "Did you talk to them yet?" I shook my head. I said, "They're only reaching out now because they're feeling it. When I was there, doing everything, they never said thank you. Not once." Jasmine nodded and said, "They miss the help, not the person." I sipped my drink and said, "Exactly." I thought back to the nights I came home from a double shift, only to find dinner cold or gone. To the times I bought detergent for the house, and it disappeared in a week, no one else replacing it. To the holidays when I wrapped presents for everyone, only to get a coffee mug in return. A mug. Every year. And now they were saying they missed me? A few days later, Dad called. I picked up this time. Dad said, "Hey." I said, "Hi." There was a pause. He cleared his throat. Dad continued, "Your mom said you were upset. We didn't mean to make you feel excluded." I didn't say anything. He went on, "We're just trying to keep the house running. Things are different now." I asked, "Different how?" He replied, "Mia's still looking for work. I've had to cover more than usual. Your mom's hours got cut. Just life stuff." I said, "Life stuff happened to me too. When I lived there." Dad said, "I know." I answered, "No, you don't. Because when I paid rent and bills and groceries, no one noticed. When I asked why Mia didn't have to contribute, you said I should be grateful." He sighed and said, "That wasn't fair." I replied, "No, it wasn't." There was another long silence. Then he said, "So, any chance you could spot us for this month?" I asked, "How much?" He said, "Whatever you can give." I said, "No, I don't give any more. I invoice." He laughed, thinking I was joking. I said, "I'm serious. You want help? Then we treat this like a business." He asked, "Are you really doing this?" I replied, "You asked me to pay rent when I had nothing. Now you want charity when I finally have something." He said, "It's different." I said, "No, it's just uncomfortable now because it's your turn." I ended the call. The next morning, I emailed them an itemized breakdown. If they wanted money, here were the terms: interest-free loan, payment dates, signatures, legal. They didn't respond. But I know they read it. A week passed. Another. Then a text from Mom. Mom wrote, "You've become cold." I stared at it. I wrote back, "No, I've become unavailable." And that was that. In the weeks that followed, I noticed something. I started sleeping better, eating better, living better. Because for the first time, I wasn't carrying people who didn't see me. I wasn't funding a household that treated me like staff. I was thriving, not just financially, but emotionally. People say setting boundaries is hard. They're right. But what's harder is staying in a place where you're only loved when you're useful. So I stopped being useful, and I started being free. I still remember the first time I turned the key in my own front door. The sound wasn't loud, but it echoed in my chest like a bell tower, sharp, solid, final. My apartment was small, just a one-bedroom over a bakery. The scent of fresh bread snuck in through the walls every morning and made everything feel warmer than it should have. I had a thrift store couch, a chipped kettle, a floor lamp that blinked if I breathed too hard near it. But it was mine. Mine. No one told me to share it. No one asked for a cut. No one rolled their eyes when I bought something just for myself. I started waking up before my alarm. Not because I was worried, because I was excited. I had peace. I had distance. I had time to figure out who I was without the noise of being second place in my own home. Within 6 months, I had saved enough to upgrade my car. Nothing flashy, but reliable. Something that wouldn't cough when I turned on the engine or wheeze at hills. When I called the dealership and asked about options, the salesman said, "Are you buying for yourself or someone else?" I said, "Just me." He replied, "Nice. You sound like someone who's earned it." That stayed with me longer than it should have. Because back at the house, everything I did was for someone else. My sister, my parents, their expectations. I finally felt the difference. At work, I got promoted. Twice. My name started showing up in meetings I used to just take notes for. I started consulting on the side, small gigs that grew fast. And eventually, I built something of my own. A tiny business with a real name and a tax ID and everything. I reinvested every dime. I worked long hours. But for the first time, the work didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like freedom. I began donating anonymously to causes I believed in. Quietly paid for a coworker's surgery bill. Bought groceries for a neighbor going through chemo. Sent surprise supplies to a local shelter. I gave generously, but never to people who treated me like a wallet with ears. That part of my life was over. One afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mom. "Mom, we haven't seen you in so long. How's everything?" I didn't answer. A day later, another message. "Dad, your sister's been struggling. We're all worried. Maybe you can talk to her." I didn't reply. And then came the real reason. "Mom, things have been tight. We're proud of how well you're doing. If you could help out just a little." I stared at the message for a long time. Help? They wanted help? After years of demanding rent from me while coddling my sister? After scolding me for needing space, money, respect? After reminding me that this house shares everything except when it came to what my sister had? I tapped out a message, then deleted it. Started again. Deleted it. Finally, I picked up the phone. Not to argue. Just to answer the question under the surface. I called. Mom picked up. Her voice was sweet, sugar-laced. Fake. Mom said, "Hi, sweetie. We were just talking about you." I said, "I know. You texted." She laughed nervously. Mom said, "Well, yes. We miss you." I said, "No, you miss what I used to give you. There's a difference." There was silence. Then Dad came on the line. Dad said, "We don't want to fight. We're just going through a tough time." I said, "So was I, when I needed a ride to my job interview. Remember that?" More silence. Dad said, "We were trying to be fair." I said, "No. You were trying to be fair to her. You expected me to be strong, so you didn't have to be." Mom tried again. Mom said, "You've always been the responsible one. You should understand." I said, "Exactly. I'm responsible. That's why I set boundaries now." Mom said, "So, is that a no?" I said, "You always said this family shares everything. So ask her." I hung up. And I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't second-guess myself. I just sat there in my apartment with the window cracked open and the sound of traffic humming low. I sat there with my freedom, with my silence, with my peace. That weekend, I went to dinner with friends, people who didn't ask me to shrink so they could shine, people who celebrated my wins without keeping score, people who saw me. We toasted to something. I don't remember what, but I remember raising my glass and thinking, I don't need to be anyone's second choice. I just need to keep choosing myself. Later that month, I passed by my parents' neighborhood on the way to a client meeting. I almost turned in. Almost. But I didn't. Because I had nothing left to prove. They shared nothing. So I shared my success with no one who'd made me feel less than. I shared it with the people who earned it, with those who'd offered me kindness when I had nothing, not conditions when I had something to give. And that, I realized, was the final gift they unknowingly gave me. They taught me that family shares everything. I just learned to stop sharing with people who only ever took.